It was a Tuesday afternoon when Elon Musk went to order a Taco Bell meal when he stopped cold after he heard two boys whisper something crazy behind him. For Elon, this Tuesday felt endless. Meetings stretched on, emails piled up, and big decisions loomed over Elon Musk's head like storm clouds. It was the kind of day where even the most ambitious minds, ones constantly calculating fuel loads, testing spacecraft, and discussing humanity's leap into the stars, felt a little drained. Sure, he was used to the intensity of his schedule, but today, even Elon found himself needing a moment to step away from it all. Sometimes, even a man like Elon Musk, known for working 80 to 100 hours a week, needed a break. And that day, he had a strange urge that pulled him in a direction he hadn't planned for. Fast food. Not just any fast food either. Something specific, something a bit indulgent. Taco Bell. It seemed ridiculous. This was the man who had envisioned a future where cars drove themselves, where humans would live on Mars. And here he was, craving a Crunchwrap Supreme. But hey, even the richest guy on Earth needed a taco once in a while. There was something about it, something nostalgic maybe, that made him feel like just a regular person for a few minutes. It reminded him of his early days, long before the billions, long before Tesla, and long before rockets were flying into space under his watch. Back then, he wasn't all that different from any other young guy trying to figure out life, grabbing quick meals between coding marathons and engineering projects. Without giving it too much thought, he hopped into his Tesla and drove to the nearest Taco Bell. It wasn't far from his current location, a typical suburban spot tucked in between a convenience store and a strip mall. It was a place where no one would expect to see a billionaire casually strolling in for a quick bite. That's exactly what Elon liked about it. As his Tesla silently glided into the parking lot, Elon caught himself chuckling. What would the media think of this, he thought. Elon Musk ditches work to get tacos. The headline would practically write itself. He stepped out of the car, looking more like an ordinary guy than the titan of industry that he was. Dressed in a plain black hoodie and jeans, Elon wasn't the eccentric billionaire most people expected. He had a knack for being understated in public, especially when he was flying solo like today. No security detail, no assistants buzzing around him with phone calls or messages, just Elon and his hunger. As he walked into the restaurant, the familiar bell above the door chimed. Inside, it was exactly what you'd expect from any Taco Bell. A few customers sitting at booths, the smell of seasoned beef and cheese hanging in the air, and the hum of a soda machine in the background. No one seemed to notice him as he stepped inside. Not yet, at least. He approached the counter and gave the menu a quick glance, already knowing what he wanted. Sure, he was here to clear his head, but that didn't mean he had all day. A Crunchwrap Supreme was his go-to, and today he figured he'd order two. Because why not? Before he could place his order, the cashier behind the counter did a double take. She knew that face, and for a second, she froze, unsure if she was seeing things. It wasn't every day that the guy behind SpaceX and Tesla walked into your Taco Bell after all. But she managed to keep it together, giving him a nervous smile. Hi, welcome to Taco Bell. What can I get for you? She said nervously. Elon, noticing, gave her a small, reassuring smile in return. He wasn't in the mood for any kind of attention, just food. I'll have 2 Crunchwrap Supremes, he said simply. The cashier punched in the order, trying to act normal, though the entire interaction felt surreal to her. She handed him his receipt and told him it would be just a few minutes. As Elon waited, he did what most people do when they're trying to pass the time. He let his mind wander. He found himself thinking about the week ahead. SpaceX had some major milestones coming up with Starship. Tesla's new AI project was going full throttle. His latest thoughts about tunneling systems with the Boring Company were taking shape. There was always so much to juggle, but in these small moments, it felt good to just focus on something simple. It was like hitting the reset button on his brain. He noticed a few customers coming and going, but none seemed to recognize him. He appreciated the anonymity. For someone constantly in the spotlight, It was rare to have a moment of peace in public. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. But it was after he finished ordering his Taco Bell meal when he stopped cold. Why? Because he heard two boys talking about something that went beyond even Elon's wildest dreams. He stood frozen for a moment, the words from the boys' conversation drifting into his consciousness. His hand hovered over the counter as he reached for his wallet, but something in their tone made him pause. At first he had barely paid attention, assuming it was just the usual chatter of teenagers. But now, their voices took on a different weight. He turned his head slightly, just enough to hear them more clearly without making it obvious that he was listening. One of the boys, his voice barely more than a whisper, was speaking rapidly, trying to keep his excitement and nerves in check. "We have to do it tonight," the boy said urgently. "If we don't, Mom's not going to get better." Elon blinked, his focus sharpened. He hadn't expected to hear that. The other boy, his brother apparently, responded quieter this time. "But what if we get caught? You know what they do to people who steal. It'll make everything worse." Steal? The word hit Elon like a punch. He glanced over at them more directly now, and from his new angle, he could see them better. They were just kids. They couldn't have been more than 13 or 14 years old. There. They sat hunched over their table as though carrying the weight of something far too heavy for their small shoulders. The older boy, clearly the leader, leaned in closer to his brother. "It's just the cash from the register. No one will know. We need it, and I don't know how else we can get the money in time." Elon's mind raced. This wasn't the usual kind of mischief that teenagers get into. This was different. He could feel the desperation in the older boy's voice, the kind of desperation that comes when you've run out of options and you don't know where to turn. And that mention of their mom, something wasn't right. Elon's instincts kicked in. He had seen a lot of things in his life, both the triumphs and the tragedies of human experience. He knew what fear sounded like, and this wasn't just two kids talking about pulling a prank or getting into trouble. This was survival. They were scared, and they were considering doing something that could ruin their lives forever. The cashier handed Elon his food, and he nodded absent-mindedly, not really paying attention. His focus was entirely on the two boys now, trying to piece together their conversation. The younger boy's voice wavered. "I don't want to do this. What if someone gets hurt?" The older one took a deep breath. "We'll be fast, in and out. No one gets hurt, I promise. We'll just grab the cash, and then we'll have enough to pay for the medicine." Medicine? That was it. That was the key. Their mother wasn't just sick, she needed medicine, and fast. Elon felt a tug deep in his chest, an emotion he didn't often acknowledge: empathy. He stood there for a few seconds, processing everything. What was he supposed to do? He couldn't just walk out and pretend he hadn't heard, but he couldn't exactly march up to them and confront them either. They'd panic, maybe even run out and do something stupid. He had to handle this carefully. Elon Musk is a lot of things, but at his core, he is someone who believed in solving problems no matter how impossible they seemed. And right now, these boys had a problem, one that needed fixing before they did something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. He turned back toward the cashier and quickly made a decision. "Hey, can you do me a favor?" he asked, his voice low. The cashier blinked at him, confused but willing to help. "Could you add 2 more crunch wraps to my order? I'll pay for them now." The cashier nodded, her hands moving quickly to punch in the order. As she did, Elon turned to the boys, taking a deep breath. He was going to approach this carefully, like a puzzle he needed to solve, without scaring them off. With his bag in hand and a calm expression, he made his way toward their table. The boys didn't notice him at first. They were too wrapped up in their anxious planning. But as Elon stepped closer, the older boy's head snapped up, his eyes wide as he realized who was standing there. Elon smiled gently, doing his best to seem non-threatening. "Hey guys," he said casually, holding up the bag. "Mind if I sit here for a second? I ordered a bit too much food, and I thought you might want to help me out with these crunch wraps." The boys exchanged a nervous glance. They were clearly starstruck, but the tension in their bodies hadn't eased. They were still on edge, as if ready to bolt at any moment. But the promise of food and maybe just the shock of Elon Musk standing in front of them made them hesitate. Sure, the older boy said, but his voice was clearly uncertain. Elon sat down across from them, setting the bag on the table and pulling out the extra crunch wraps. He placed one in front of each boy. They stared at the food, confused, but also tempted. It was hard to think straight when you're a kid and you haven't eaten properly. He let them unwrap their food before saying anything else. His calm, measured approach seemed to work, as the boys slowly took a few bites, though their nerves were still visible. So, Elon started, his voice still casual. I couldn't help but overhear a bit of your conversation. Sounds like you guys are dealing with something pretty tough. The boys froze mid-bite. Their faces paled, and the older one immediately went defensive. We weren't doing anything wrong, he said quickly, his voice tight. We were just talking, that's all. Elon nodded, still calm. I get it. You're not in trouble. I just want to help. I heard you mention your mom. She's sick, right? The younger boy's eyes welled up with tears, but he tried to blink them away. The older boy, clearly trying to protect his brother, swallowed hard and nodded reluctantly. Yeah, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She's really sick. She needs this medicine and we don't have the money. We've tried everything. Elon's heart clenched. These kids were barely teenagers, yet here they were, carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, trying to find a way to save their mom. They were desperate and terrified. We don't want to steal, the older boy continued with a shaky voice, but we don't know what else to do. We're out of options. Elon leaned in slightly, his gaze steady and filled with understanding. Look, I know you're scared. I know it feels like there's no way out. But trust me when I say that taking that path, robbing this place, it won't fix anything. It'll only make things worse for you and your mom. The older boy dropped his gaze with tears brimming in his eyes. But what else can we do? The medicine is expensive, and the bills keep piling up. We can't lose her. Elon took a deep breath, knowing he had to tread carefully. I can help, he said softly. I've been lucky in life. I've built businesses, sure, but I've also seen how hard it can be for people, how it feels to be desperate and out of options. Let me help you. Let me help your mom. The boys looked at him in disbelief. They couldn't process what he was saying. Why would Elon Musk, the man of the men, want to help them? You're serious? The older boy asked. Elon nodded. Completely. Look, you don't have to go through this alone. There are ways to get help without putting yourselves or your future at risk. I can help cover the medical costs and get your mom the medicine she needs. You don't need to steal. You don't need to carry this weight by yourselves. For a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. The boys stared at Elon. Their eyes were wide with hope and disbelief. Slowly, the older boy's shoulders sagged as the weight of his burden began to lift, even if just a little. You'd really do that? The younger boy finally asked. You'd help us? Elon smiled warmly. Yeah, I'd really do that. And you know what? I don't want anything in return. I just want you to keep doing what you're doing. Taking care of each other, taking care of your mom. That's all that matters. The older boy's lip trembled, and for the first time since Elon had approached them, he let out a shaky breath. Thank you, he whispered, the tears finally spilling over. Elon reached across the table and gave the boy's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. You're going to be okay, he said quietly. We'll figure this out together. And in that moment, Elon knew that this was exactly where he was meant to be. Not in a boardroom, not on a conference call, but right here, helping these kids when they needed it the most. So finally, do you think that it was Elon's guts that told him where to go? And do you know any other heartwarming stories like this? If you do, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next video.